Good morning and welcome to Peace Out. Well, we're working on it, right? And it's okay because it's a process. You know what? Everything's a process. Faith is a process. A relationship is a process. Everything is a process if you think about it a little bit, right? It's a process of either believing or learning something or working on something, right? There's a lot of different, most of the aspects of our lives our processes. And so is peace out. Well, I guess we thought there was just a button. I always thought there was just a button, right? And there's just a faith button you can push and just trust God and you never worry about anything again. I think not. But as we trust Him over and over, we tend to worry less and less. Now, initially, sometimes we get news or circumstances change or something else changes or it's like wow and it takes us a second, but I think as we grow in grace, we grow in faith, we grow in our knowledge of God, right, then it takes less and less time. So finding that peace out button gets easier, doesn't it? I hope. Yes, I think so. Let's believe it does. I believe it does. I think it's easier to go, hey, I can't control this, God. Can you just help me with it? Right? Or I don't know what to do with this. So you just show me what to do, God. And just putting things in His hands comes a little more naturally as we trust Him more and more. But there's not a peace out button. I've been looking for it. If you find it though, let me know because I could be wrong on that. Anyway, I hope you had a good weekend. I hope you had a good week planned. This is everybody. You know what I've noticed this week, and this is totally off topic. But everybody's always complaining about the weather. It's too hot. It's too cold. It's all this. I have had about 3 or 4 people tell me that I've run into my neighbors or wherever I've been, and they're just like, "I love this time of year. I love this weather," and I've just enjoyed that positivity, right? Just that people are like, "This is a good time of year," and you're in it for the holidays. I don't like the holidays because they're just crazy. But you know, it's just nice to have that positivity, and that goes a long ways. Now, that's just a plug there. Okay, anyway, so that doesn't have anything to do with what I'm talking about today. So this morning, as I told you last week, I'm reading through Matthew. So I found this story we've read. I don't even know how many times we've probably talked about this story, but this today, as always, see something a little bit different when you read it again. And that's why it's so important to read the word over and over and to hide it in your heart and to meditate on it and to go back and read it again because it's not like, I don't know if I know there's not very many books that I've read twice because once I've read the book, you know the plot, you know what happens, he got the girl, it's over, right? But there's been a few books I've read over that again, but the Bible doesn't change, but my understanding of it does, and I can understand more than I did last time, and that makes it's the truth. Hebrews 4 tells us that the word of God is alive, and it is. And as we grow, we understand more. So I encourage, read it all the time. I actually heard someone say once, "Oh yeah, I read it once," and they were done. But there's so much in there. There's so much to unfold. There's so much I can't get right now that I may get tomorrow, right? And we can liken that to natural maturity. You can't explain driving a car to a small child. They don't get it. They don't even have the capacity but they ride in the car, and then as they grow up, they gain motor control, they gain muscle control, they gain, you know, cognitive experiences, then they have the experiences and the physical ability to drive a car. And it's the same way as we're reading the word. As we grow, we grow, we change, and we get new concept. It's not a new concept, but it's new to us because we never got it before because our experiences hadn't brought us that far yet, right? And so it just is always unfolding, and that's one of the things I love about the word is I can read it again. I can read the same story tomorrow and get something totally new out of it because my perspective has changed. I've grown. I hope I've grown, right? And I hope you're growing too, right? So here we are in Matthew 8 in a very common story again. One of the stories we started with, as a matter of fact, when we started Peace Out, coming up on 4 years ago, it says this. It says, "Now when Jesus, got into the boat, his disciples followed him." Never paid any attention to that before. "And suddenly a great tempest arose on the sea, so that the boat was covered with waves." Scary, right? "But he was asleep. Then his disciples came to him and woke him and said, 'Lord, save us. We're all going to die. We're perishing.' But he said to them, 'Why are you fearful?'" This is before he calmed the storm. Why are you fearful, O you of little faith? Then he arose, rebuked the winds and the sea, and there was a great calm. So the men marveled, saying, who can this be that even the winds and the sea obey him? Now, I'm going to try not to get ahead of myself. First off, these little storms are scary. Right? You can just get really scared. And I had the only experience I had that's close to it is one time in Louisiana. My friend Joanne and I believe Renella was with me, and we were driving along the coast, probably east of Holly Beach, and there was a little place called Monkey Island, and we decided we wanted to go across, and the only way to get across was this little bitty car-sized ferry. And just about the time we drove onto that ferry to go across to see Monkey Island, this huge storm came in. I do believe this is one of the most frightening days of my life. 10 minutes, 5 minutes, it probably wasn't even that long. It wasn't very wide, it wasn't very far across, but the wind was horrible. The waves were coming up over on the ferry. The car was getting all wet. I was so scared. We got across. I was never so happy to get across on dry ground, right? We literally drove around Monkey Island, saw a hawk, grabbed a snake. That was about the only thing there. It was just construction. It was just in industry on the island, probably offshore drills and stuff like that. But there wasn't much there. It was literally 5 minutes. We turned around, got back on the ferry. The storm had calmed. We went back across. But that was scary. They were scared. They had a right to be afraid. And sometimes situations in our lives, we have the right to be afraid for a minute, right? It's okay. There are some scary things out there, right? But here's some things I pulled out of the story this morning that I never really thought about before. First off, they followed him. He didn't say, this is not the time where he said, let's go to the other side. This isn't the time where he sent them to the other side. He just went and got into a boat, and his disciples followed him willfully, just got in the boat with him, right? So they were just following Jesus, and yet they hit a storm. And I've said a whole lot of times, just because we're following him doesn't mean we're not going to run into a storm. Doesn't mean we're not going to have a struggle. Doesn't mean we're not going to have a trial. They followed him into the storm, basically. They didn't know it, right? And then there's suddenly, and I understand this now. Suddenly, this wind just comes out of nowhere, and the waves start beating this little boat all over the place, right? But where was Jesus? He was asleep. Does it ever feel like you're going through a storm and Jesus is asleep? Does it ever feel like you're going through something and he's not even watching? He's not even paying attention. It's like, hello, I'm dying here, right? And he's just asleep. So they followed him. Then they woke him up and they said, don't you care that we're dying here? And he kind of got onto him a little bit. He said, why are you afraid? Why are you afraid? Oh, you have little faith. So they had a little faith, but they were still afraid. And sometimes we say, you can't ever be afraid if you have faith. But you know what? Even when you have faith, things can be scary, right? Things can be frightening. Things can be overwhelming. It doesn't mean you don't have any faith, right? Because they had enough faith to wake him up. They had enough faith to follow him in the boat. And sometimes we sell ourselves short and we condemn ourselves or judge ourselves because we don't have enough faith, right? But we got enough faith to follow him, right? We have enough faith to know when to reach out to him. Those are both faith. And you know what? Jesus told us this, is going to tell his disciples later in some stories about if you have faith just as big as a little bitty mustard seed, you can move a mountain. You can calm a storm. That's an interesting thought because they don't know that yet. They don't know that yet, right? But he's going to tell them that later. Then it says he arose, he rebuked the winds he rebuked the winds and the sea, and there was a great calm, just like that. That had to have been just a fascinating thing to watch. You're in a boat, you're getting beat all over the place. You're frightened, you think you're going to die, you think the boat's just going to fall apart, and then boom, there's calm. And then it says, the men marveled. And they said, who is this? Well, why did they think they were following him? Who is this? Well, you followed him. You tell me who he is, right? They said, who is this that even the winds and the sea obey him? What did they think he was going to do when they woke him up? Did, were they going to rapture? I mean, why did they even wake him up if they didn't understand his capacity to calm the sea, to understand his capacity to just bring peace where there had been turmoil, right? To bring peace where there had been fear. I mean, Jesus with just one button settled everything in a moment. So I want to go back over it. They followed him into the boat and they landed right in a storm, right? They woke him up and then they said, who is he? They didn't even realize who was with them. Yet they had enough sense to pray. They had enough sense to wake him up. And so I want to encourage you today that first off, you've got faith. Everybody is given a measure of faith. And we can build on that faith. We can grow that faith. We can cultivate that faith. And a lot of that is through the word, through prayer, through meditation, through growing that relationship with God. We can cultivate our faith. The more we know him, the more we'll trust him. They didn't really know him yet. He had basically just a few chapters ago, although our lives is not exactly in chapters, right? He's just called them not long ago. They don't really know who he is yet, right? But they followed him. And sometimes we follow him, we follow God, not knowing really who he is. We don't have a deep relationship yet, but we know enough to call on him when there's a storm. We know enough to call on him when we are in trouble. We know enough to know that he's our refuge no matter what, right? And God can work with that. Isn't that awesome? He works with us wherever we are, whatever we're going through. He can bring peace right in the middle of whatever we're facing. And then at the end, their questions lets me know they didn't even know who he was. They didn't even know. And Jesus didn't say, now later he's going to say, have I been with you this long and you still don't know? But he didn't say that here, right? Excuse me. He didn't say that here. And so they followed him, but they knew enough to pray. They had a little faith, and it was enough to calm the storm. But they had no idea who Jesus really was. And yet he didn't say, well, you don't know me, so I'm not going to calm the storm. You didn't pray right. I'm not going to calm the storm. No, you didn't fill it out in triplicate in three copies and send it to the right departments. You didn't quote the right scripture. You didn't say the prayer right. No, he just calmed the storm. And he will calm the storms in our lives and in our hearts too, even if we're not to the point of knowing him yet. If we know enough to follow him and we know enough to pray, he's got us covered and we can peace out. So follow the leader, right? He's the leader. Follow him. He's got you covered and you can peace out. Peace out today. Have a great day. I'll see you tomorrow.